1. My husband won $100 million in the lottery and wanted a divorce. I quickly agreed, packed my things and left. Then disaster struck. A wild blizzard roared. While I was snug in a self-built villa in the countryside, enjoying a lamb hot pot, my ex and his girlfriend were huddling together, gnawing on moldy, dry buns, convincing themselves we got money. Money can buy anything. I recalled how he killed me in the last life and thought, money? Try buying your life first. I came back to life. Colin again was yelling for a divorce. I buried my fury and agreed right away. He didn't expect I'd give in so easily and kept asking, you really agreed to the divorce? No tricks, right? I glanced at the clock. We had 10 days before disaster struck. Time was tight. Let's head to the civil office right now. On the way, I saw his face full of pride, unable to hide how pleased he was. It took everything I had not to strangle him. In our last life, in desperate times, he picked up an axe and hit me. That pain still lingered on my skull. This time I'd make him pay. When divvying up assets, I only asked for the savings, $200,000 and a car. Colin agreed eagerly, even acting like he deserved a medal. See how good I am to you. I'm leaving with nothing. I laughed mockingly, pretending I didn't know. Didn't I leave the house to you? He wasn't faking generosity. He thought I was clueless, but I knew. He'd won $100 million and wanted to ditch me before claiming the prize. In the past, I wasn't aware of this. When our happy family abruptly shattered, I didn't want a divorce and hoped to save our relationship. Until he brought his coworker Gil home, I found out my supposedly good husband was cheating. When disaster hit, a blizzard raged on while the three of us were stuck under one roof with limited supplies. They forced me out in the freezing weather for resources and even wanted me to sell myself to get them food. I resisted till the end, but during a fight, Colin grabbed an axe and struck my head. I didn't die immediately. As I lay dying, I saw their greedy eyes. Fresh meat, Colin said. So tender, I raised her well. This time I left the house to him because it was useless during an apocalypse. He could have it as his coffin. I filed the divorce papers and rushed to pack. Mid-packing, Colin came back looking pleased. He probably got the $100 million. I ignored him, focused on packing my winter clothes. Colin grabbed some short sleeves and shorts and waved goodbye. See ya, my ex-wife. Take your junk and get lost back to your countryside. I'm heading out to party. Same as before. He and Gil would head to Sonia Beach and return just as the extreme cold hit. Their thin clothes didn't stand a chance once stepping off the plane, taking their anger out on me for nearly being late to pick them up. Forced me to hand over my cashmere coat and sweater to Gil and Colin. On the drive home, the car was warm inside. Yet I shivered so much I struggled to grip the wheel. Added with slippery roads, I rear-ended another car. Colin yanked me by my hair into the steering wheel, scolding me, you worthless. Did you try to kill me because of Gil? As soon as Colin left, I hurried to clear everything out. His winter clothes, packed them all for my dad. 8 quilts, my dowry, even in a divorce they're mine. Smoked meat? My mom made those, they're coming too. In the kitchen I noticed the axe meant for chopping big bones, yet the weapon that killed me last time. I gazed at it, then casually put it on the bar. I glanced around the empty feeling house, then set up surveillance cameras in key spots. Finished, I packed up and drove overnight to our country home. Tears flowed when I saw my parents. In the last life, the power and internet were down. I never got to contact them, not knowing if they survived. Seeing me cry, they got worried, quickly asking what happened. I hesitated but told them everything, including the doomsday and my rebirth. My mom cried angrily, and my dad cursed while lighting a cigarette. Colin, what a beast. Dad, there's no time for that, we need to retrofit the house and stock up food. My dad stubbed his smoke, agreeing, all right daughter, whatever you say we'll do. I cautiously asked, you really believe this rebirth stuff? Don't think I'm just crazy? My dad patted my head. True or not, as long as you're happy, we're with you. Our home was in a fruit orchard around the village. My parents were lifelong fruit farmers and built a 3-story blockhouse for living and tending trees. I looked at the recent build, thinking it wouldn't withstand. The blizzard wasn't just snow but wind. It would sway entire tower blocks, shattering windows from pressure. To bear the snow-loaded roof, the house needed reinforcement. We called a team to reinforce and insulate. We replaced the glass with triple layers and installed 5 large solar power panels on the roof. Picked ones good on cloudy days. When power cuts, solar's our lifeline. We also needed heat. In rural areas, folks use gas, but when it's out, radiators go cold and you freeze anyway. I dug an old coal stove from storage. Burning coal cooked up heat during my childhood winters, too. But this stove hasn't been used in ages, and it's all rusted and dusty. When my dad saw I was struggling, he asked me what was up and then laughed. You can't even get coal anymore, so even if this stove works, it's useless. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll get you a new one. Around dusk, my dad came back with a small truck. On it were 5 brand new pellet stoves and hundreds of bags of pellet fuel. These stoves can heat, boil water, and cook. Plus, the fuel is long-lasting, eco-friendly, and safe. I put one in each of the 2 bedrooms and the living room on the 3rd floor, and kept 2 on the 2nd floor. I stored the fuel on the 1st floor, which becomes uninhabitable when snow reaches 10 feet, so I use it as a storage area. By the time the workers finished installing the exhaust pipes, it was already late. The 3 of us had a quick dinner and then hit the bed to recharge for the big day ahead. The next day we split up. My dad went to the local market to buy fresh meat, pork, lamb, beef, chicken, and duck. I drove to a big supermarket to get consumables, household goods, and fast food. My mom stayed home to pick fruits and veggies from our garden. It's September, and with a good harvest, there's plenty to do. At the supermarket, I grabbed cozy duvets, electric blankets, and long-down coats with high fill power, along with expensive but lightweight thermal wear. Then it was on to tissues, disinfectants, and other household products, loading the cart with boxes. These items last long, so stocking up won't hurt. I bought a bunch of fast food too, just in case we can't cook. Leaving the supermarket, I passed a workwear store and picked up military coats, waterproof boots, down gloves, and padded masks. Based on my prediction, if we survive the natural disaster, it'll get even colder. We'll need to shovel a lot of snow and handle drainage, so these will be handy. My car's small, so it took 3 trips to get everything home. My dad got lots of meat. Not just the usual but also various bones, fish, and shrimp. Crabs were plump this time of year, so he brought 5 boxes. Even though he drove a van, he made multiple trips and rented 5 commercial freezers for storage. Although it's bitterly cold during a snowstorm and the unheated first floor becomes an ice house, the meat needs freezing for preservation these days. Helping with the freezing, I found a compartment already filled with various ice cream flavors. My mom laughed and teased, "Your dad always spoils you. Scared you'd crave ice cream, so he bought a bunch." Still, she said, a girl shouldn't eat too much ice cream. And if it gets as cold as you say, no more cold treats. While she carried on, my hands were freezing from the cold, but my heart felt warm. Since it's pretty deserted here, our hustle went unnoticed. With the shopping done, my dad and I helped Mom harvest fruits and veggies. We took everything, ripe or not, to the first floor. My dad, worried we'd tire of the same foods, bought more fresh produce from the market, filling an entire room. But my mom started to worry. Some things store well in low temperatures, but others like eggplants, beans, and lotus roots don't. Figuring out how to preserve them without waste was the challenge. I gave Mom a wink and said, "Remember how we handled New Year's food?" She smacked her forehead. "Right. You're smart." She quickly set up the fryer and mixed meat filling. She started frying eggplant and lotus root patties, and a batch of radish balls. Dad took the chance to fetch a load of seasonings, oil, rice, and flour. The freshly fried eggplant patties were crispy and fragrant. My mom insisted I try some. I took one, blew on it to cool, and savored it slowly. It felt like I was back in my childhood, calm and peaceful. Taking a breather, I checked my phone for updates on the outside world. As I scrolled through my feed, I saw a big selfie Colin had posted with Gil all snuggled up next to him. The pics showed them having a blast in Sanya, staying at a fancy hotel and feasting on seafood. They were surfing in bikinis by day and partying at a rock bar by night. I gave their post a genuine like. Enjoy it, guys, have all the fun. Make the most of the good times while they last. After dealing with fruits and veggies, we dried the beans, made pumpkin puree, and canned tomatoes. With autumn pears, we planned to turn them into snow pears by burying them outside. Any tricky or hard to store items went into the fridge. Luckily, we still had the old fridge, so both were big enough. I moved out the drinks and milk, and everything fit perfectly. Once finished, I took a nice shower. Suddenly a chilling thought hit me like a ton of bricks. We had no stored water. The blizzard would cut off both electricity and water. Pipes freeze, tanks crack. We'd have to melt snow, which is slow and dirty, full of dust and grit. Before, Colin and Gil had big bottles of water, but I had to drink melted snow. It made my stomach ache so bad I couldn't stop going to the bathroom. Awful to drink. There were less than 5 days left till the natural disaster from last time. I rushed out with wet hair to find my dad. My mom followed with a towel. Why the rush? Wet hair will give you a headache. Oh Mom, no water is the real headache. After telling my dad my concerns, he gave me a knowing smile. How does that saying go? Out with the old, in with the new? Something like that? Nah, it's not those. Then what? Ginger, my dear, old ginger's the spiciest. Turns out Dad had it covered. He'd arranged with a factory working uncle to get us 3 stainless steel water tanks. They're not just insulated, they're high-quality 304 stainless steel. Once they arrived, they took up a good chunk of the yard. 3. The amount of water we've got stored should last our family of 3 for at least half a year. If we use it carefully, it could even stretch to a year. We also bought a big water purifier, so even if there's contamination, we won't be helpless. After sorting out this big deal, I took some time to think about everything that happened in my past life, and what else needed to be done. My parents suddenly remembered something else. The corn in the field hadn't been harvested yet. Although the corn wasn't quite ready for harvest as the moisture hadn't dried out completely, the coming snowstorm would definitely ruin it, which would be a real shame. So, they quickly organized a harvester to bring in the corn early. This finally caught the attention of the villagers, who stood at the edge of the field, pointing and talking. Blake's family, huh? Seems like you guys have forgotten how to farm while planting fruit trees. You're at least 10 days early for the corn. It's gonna get moldy, and the buyers will reject it once they test the moisture. My parents just laughed it off, saying it was no big deal. I also tried to warn them kindly. Uncles, I feel like the weather's acting strange this year. Better safe than sorry, right? They just scoffed at me. What do you know, little girl? How many times have you actually worked in the fields? I reckon this family raising only daughters isn't cutting it, listening to sheer nonsense all the time with no heirs around to carry on the name. My parents didn't bother with their comments and kept working enthusiastically. I was a bit anxious though. Nothing seemed to change in the weather despite the impending disaster. Since I could be reborn, maybe the disaster wouldn't happen again? If things didn't go down like before, we'd take a hit on this season's harvest. I shared my concerns with them, but they didn't seem worried at all. If nothing happens, that's even better. If losing a cornfield buys peace of mind for our daughter, it's worth it. Then the next day the weather changed drastically. After the first autumn rain cleared, it was nice and cool, but temperatures suddenly skyrocketed. It hit 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius. People across the country were complaining about how relentless the late summer heat was. My heart grew heavier. It was happening again. In my past life it was scorching for 2 days, and on the afternoon of the 3rd day, strong winds blew in, temperatures dropped sharply, and then a snowstorm followed. I commented under some related posts, warning people of the strange weather and suggesting stocking up just in case. But I was hit with ridicule. Here to sell supplies, huh? Another one brainwashed by end-of-the-world novels. Who hoards food in such hot weather? They eventually deleted my posts for deliberately inciting panic. My account was later banned after trying again a few times. I felt helpless, hoping my brief warning had caught at least some attention. If anyone heeds the advice, that'll be a relief. Tossing my phone aside, I threw myself back into the prep. Time was tight. My dad was busy installing the partitions between floors to create smaller spaces, making heating more efficient. Meanwhile, my mom was all over the stove, steaming buns, making pancakes, and preparing lots of dumplings that could be cooked directly when needed. Time flew by, and suddenly a surveillance app on my phone alerted me. Colin's house had visitors. It turned out to be him and Gil, returning home a day earlier than last time. I couldn't tell why they changed their plans, but from the monitors nothing seemed off. They were dressed for the heat, complaining about the damn hot weather, then went to their bedroom for a bit, ordered some takeout and went to sleep. Little did they know, they'd wake up to a drastically changed world. On the afternoon of September 5th, the snowstorm hit as expected. Looking at the blizzard out my window, I felt relieved that everything was set. We'd spent all of our $20,000 savings, and with the additional few grand from my parents, we had enough supplies to last a while. Online, people were either cursing the crazy weather or questioning if there was some wrongdoing involved. Some began to sense something amiss and suggested stocking up. By evening, with no sign of the snow stopping and continuously piling up, more people started heading out to buy supplies just in case. Gil, still snugged up in bed with Colin, noticed the related news too. "Colin, should we also stock up on food?" she asked softly. "It's freezing out. If anyone's going out, it's gotta be you," Colin retorted, tossing his phone to Gil. "Money can get you anything. Just order stuff online and have it delivered." It took over 2 hours before their order finally arrived. Colin grumbled about giving the delivery guy a bad review for being so slow despite the hefty tip, though he didn't consider how the snow had already reached halfway up his calves. I peeked at their purchases, and besides their takeout, it was just snacks and beer. Shaking my head, I turned off the surveillance. I left my room, curious about dinner, only to find the living room empty. I dashed downstairs and finally found my mom, pacing as she anxiously eyed the door. "Mom, what's up?" I asked. "Your dad hasn't come back yet," she said, her voice trembling. My heart skipped a beat. "Where did Dad go?" I asked urgently. "After lunch when the wind picked up, he said he'd go grab some stuff from your grandpa's place," she replied. "My grandpa passed away long ago, but his old house held so many memories for us. My dad probably wanted a last visit amid this unknown disaster," which I understood. Looking outside, not a soul was visible. Just huge snowflakes pelting down, the fierce wind making it impossible to open my eyes fully. The snow drifts outside made walking impossible. Once it got darker, finding the way home would be harder. In the biting cold, I was sweating a bit with anxiety and immediately rushed to go find my dad. I had just changed and was about to start the car when I heard my mom's joyous shout. "He's back! Your dad's back!" Running to the door, I saw Dad jump out of the car wearing a proud smile. Good thing I thought ahead and put snow chains on the tires, or else I'd been stuck here until midnight, he boasted. My mom rushed forward. "You think you're so smart, huh? You nearly scared our daughter and me to death. Couldn't you have gotten whatever it was earlier instead of today?" Dad chuckled and started unloading the van. First off were farming tools, shovels, sickles, hammers, and a chainsaw. These would not only be handy for clearing snow, but if it came to it, might save lives. Then there was a whole sack of persimmons. For our daughter's absolute favorite thing is the crispy persimmons from the tree in front of our old house. Finally, they were ripe enough today, so I picked them all. Not sure if it was the wind blowing too hard or what, but suddenly my eyes got all teary and blurry. I blinked a few times and saw my dad pulling out the last item from the passenger seat. It was a dog. A chunky, shiny-coated mutt. My mom was startled and stepped back a few times. The dog seemed scared too and jumped behind my dad, tail tucked between its legs. This scene was kind of funny. I gently called out to it, and it cautiously came to me, even licking my hand softly with its thick tongue. It was warm and tickly. Turns out the dog was one I found near our old house. It was hanging around when I left. Worried it might freeze, I brought it along. My dad explained all this, but Mom wasn't thrilled. She murmured about another mouth to feed during these hard times. I disagreed. Everything happens for a reason, and it's all a part of the best plan. So I patted its head and decided, "Welcome to the family. Let's call you Fat Tiger." As it got darker, the snow fell harder. We had prepared, yet facing the unknown kept us worrying. Luckily, the steaming homemade noodle soup Mom cooked was comforting. The noodles were firm with chicken broth, fresh cilantro, meatballs, shredded chicken, and sweet garlic. I ate until I was full and warm before heading to bed. But soon the howling winds woke me. Chilly drafts seeped through every crack, amplifying fears. I got up and put on my cozy pajamas. The living room light was on. My dad was covering windows with thick plastic sheets for better insulation. This clear plastic didn't block the light, but I worried about ventilation. Dad assured me while hammering away that he installed a fresh air system during the house renovations. So no matter how sealed, the air would stay fresh. I gave my dad a thumbs up for his foresight and with nothing to help with returned to bed. Restlessly I scrolled the internet. Many people, unprepared for the sudden snow, lamented about being cold. As I wondered about Colin, my phone rang, startling me. It was Colin. When I picked up, he lashed out immediately. "Jane, where's the thick blanket? I'm freezing here. I can't find it anywhere. Where did you put it?" I calmly replied, "Oh, the thick blanket? That was part of my stuff from the marriage. Since we divorced, I took it with me. Didn't you expect that?" But even a blanket? You're just a country bumpkin who deserves this trash." I don't have patience for such things, so I ended the call and put my phone on airplane mode, then checked my surveillance app. Colin tried calling several times, and frustrated with no answer, he swore, threw his phone on the bed, then angrily pestered the air conditioner. "Is this stupid thing broken? It's on max but still so cold. It's useless." He fiddled with it before curling up with Gil under a thin silk blanket. Next morning, the snow paused. The government quickly organized snow clearing on roads, with many citizens joining voluntarily. Online, people complained about having to work and take kids to school in such cold. Everyone thought it was over, but I knew it was just a break before the Real storm hit. Some sensed it too, urging others to stockpile essentials just in case. This time, people weren't as skeptical compared to when I initially warned, and some agreed. I sighed in relief. Checking the surveillance, I saw Colin arguing with Gil, wrapped in a blanket. "Colin, no one's delivering food, nor doing errands. How about you go out and get us something? In this cold? You want me to go out? Are you trying to freeze me? Here's some money. You go." "But I'm small. I'll be buried in snow. Can you really stand that?" Colin's face said he clearly could. Before he responded, someone in the property management group tagged everyone. They offered to buy essentials if needed. Many people said they didn't need help and could manage themselves, but Colin eagerly transferred money and sent a huge red envelope, insisting on getting a share of everything they bought. Before noon, the snow began again, just as fierce as the night before. Schools and businesses were ordered to close so people could return home to wait it out. Finally, everyone realized the need to stock up and began emptying supermarket shelves. Despite limited supplies, everyone managed to bring home a bit. Colin and Gil stayed home doing nothing. They shared an instant noodle cup for lunch, waiting for the property management's delivery. But as evening approached, there was still no sign. Growing impatient, Colin bombarded the group chat, tagging the contact furiously for a response. None came. Curiosity had me accidentally click on the contact's profile, giving me a chill. Turns out he was the same guy, Eric, who Colin tried to force me to be with in my previous life. Back then, Eric exploited his control over supplies during disasters to become a tyrant. Now there's no way he'd give Colin anything willingly. 5. It snowed for days, piling up to almost 6 feet deep. The temperature dropped to -50 degrees. Cooking some comforting meals helped, but the time still seemed to drag on endlessly. Seeing this, my dad pulled out a deck of cards from who knows where, and the three of us played some do de jeu. Our dog, Fat Tiger, ran around us excitedly. The fire burned bright, and the room felt nice and cozy. The plastic sheet on the window kept out the cold completely. Dad made some hot tea, and Mom brought out some sunflower seeds for me to snack on in their pure form. She also put some dried sweet potatoes on the heater, and they were chewy and sweet. I turned on the TV show Empresses in the Palace as background noise. We were all caught up in the fun, forgetting how icy it was outside. Meanwhile, Colin and Gil were still living off the last of their snacks, waiting for supplies from their apartment complex. They huddled under one blanket, often getting into petty fights over a single treat. That day, I took a lazy afternoon nap. Waking up, I thought about grabbing an ice cream to wake up, but was hit with an aroma of delicious meat instead. I went to check it out and saw that Mom had made lamb vertebrae hot pot. The lamb was tender and flavorful, basically falling off the bone. It came with all sorts of meat slices, veggies, and tofu. I dipped them in sesame sauce and chive sauce and enjoyed every bite. Once my belly was full, I remembered to ask my parents why we suddenly had hot pot. Mom hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I couldn't sleep after thinking about what you said happened in a past life. It must have been so painful for you." Dad put down his chopsticks and took a swig of white wine. "We feel guilty for not protecting you. We'll make up for it this time. Your mom heard you missed hot pot, so she made it." I couldn't hold back anymore and hugged them, letting my tears soak their clothes. Seeing them worry and blame themselves made my resentment towards Colin peak. I had snapped a photo of the freshly cooked lamb hot pot. With the snow outside as a backdrop, the steaming meat looked extra tempting. I put the pictures up on my social media, making it visible only to Colin. Within 10 minutes he video called me and I ignored it. He called again and when I picked up he shouted, "Jane, where are you? How are you eating hot pot?" I nonchalantly replied, "You told me to leave, why do you care where I am? You went back to your family's, right? To the countryside?" I sent him a photo of a newly renovated spot in our house. "Does this look like my family home?" Colin went silent. He had visited my family just 2 months ago, and the fresh renovation didn't match the old rural house at all. Then he softened his tone. "Jane, I messed up. Divorcing you was a stupid move. I'm really sorry. Tell me where you are, I'll come find you. It's really cold and hungry here without you. Please don't let me starve." His change of tone made me chuckle. "Sure, why not?" I replied sarcastically. "You have someone else with you, why do you think of this plain old gal?" With that I hung up. Through the camera I saw Colin kick a chair in frustration and search the house for food. It looked like they'd run out of snacks, leaving only piles of empty wrappers. In the end he chugged water, either to quench his anger or his hunger. Let them think water is of luxury now, they'll miss it when it's gone. After a moment, he whispered something to Gil, and they left sneakily. Over an hour later, the two of them returned, slamming the door shut and locking it. They collapsed on the floor exhausted. I noticed Colin had a black eye and some scratches on his face. Gil was in worse shape, her hair a mess, blood on her lips, and missing her winter coat. They clutched plastic bags filled with instant noodles and fast food like sausages and instant hot pot. Meanwhile, the apartment group's messages blew up with complaints. 2 girls on the 8th floor were accusing them of breaking in and stealing. Message after message appeared, but nobody replied. It was a harsh reminder of human desperation. Days passed and the snow kept falling. It showed no sign of stopping, now reaching the 2nd floor. The temperature had plummeted to -60 degrees. Even with a roaring fire, the cold seeped in, leaving nothing warm. We resorted to heated blankets, thick clothing, and sipping hot tea to keep comfortable. Fortunately, our dog Fat Tiger was like a living hand warmer, curling up on my lap to keep us both cozy. Then came the bad news. The power went out, cutting us off from the world. Our solar panels weren't very useful, buried under snow with no sun in sight. Luckily, Dad had stocked up on large batteries, and I charged multiple power banks, staving off disaster for a while. We turned off the heated blankets and limited the heaters to conserve electricity. The initial plan to sleep together to save power was scrapped due to the chilling floors, leaving no choice but to stick to separate rooms with heaters. The bitter cold dampened our spirits, casting a quiet over the days that went on endlessly. 6. The cards were put aside and no one wanted to play anymore. My dad bundled up and rummaged through the warehouse on the 1st floor for a while. He brought back 2 dusty things: a radio and a telescope. He fiddled with the radio for a while and got a signal. It was from the government, urging people to help themselves and announcing that supplies were being air-dropped. They were also working hard to restore electrical circuits. Hearing from the outside world eased our minds a bit, and life didn't seem so hard. My mom made some spicy beef jerky, which I munched on while flipping through comic books I bought back in middle and high school. When the chewing tired me out, I'd grab a bite of freshly made sticky rice with 8 treasures. It was gooey and sweet. Eating filled up my life just like it filled my stomach. When reading got too tiring, I'd pull out the telescope and check out the view outside the window. It was still all white day after day with no change. But each time it felt like my spirit flew free, without the agitation of being trapped. But unexpectedly, that peaceful life was shattered one night. At 2 a.m. when we were sound asleep, my dog, who was curled up at the foot of my bed, suddenly bolted out. Then came the sound of breaking glass, and plastic sheeting tearing. Along with our dog's fierce barking, I jumped out of bed and ran out, seeing 2 or 3 shadowy figures climbing through the window. My dad came out of the bedroom, grabbed a metal rod and started swinging at them. Our dog, not to be outdone, lunged and bit. The fight ended soon after without me even fully grasping what happened. Those 3 fled in panic. As they left, our dog clung to one of their legs, refusing to let go. They probably didn't expect an attack dog at our home. Seeing shadows roll away on the snow, we dared to turn on the lights. Glass shards covered the floor, with traces of blood here and there. My mom and I hurried to check if anyone or the dog was hurt. My dad was fine, just strained his hand a bit. The dog was slightly hurt, its right front paw caught on sharp glass, but it wasn't bleeding much. It was likely the blood we saw was from the intruders. I took out a stocked first aid kit, full of various supplies I'd hoarded. I cleaned and bandaged their wounds carefully. The dog didn't show any pain, just panted and looked smug. I couldn't help but smile, giving it a piece of jerky. None of us got much sleep that night. At dawn, Mom got up to make bone soup for the dog, to help it recover. Dad and I used the telescope to carefully check where the robbers came from and which direction they went. We concluded they must be villagers from a nearby orchard, who noticed our chimney always smoking and got greedy. They used a plank to slide toward our house. The snow had piled up to the second floor, so it was easy to climb and break the third-floor window. Dad frowned for a long while before fetching over 30 large rat traps from the warehouse. They were meant for the orchard, deemed too powerful by Dad, but now seemed perfect. He set them all around the house, ensuring that if the snow stayed below a person's height, they'd get caught stepping on them. If the snow grew deeper, he planned to reset them. With no spare window glass, Dad nailed a board over the broken window. Though it darkened the room a bit, it wasn't much of an issue. Just as the house was tidied up, we received some good news. The power came back on. We quickly charged the batteries and power banks. I turned on my dead phone and noticed the network was back too. Surprisingly, during the outage, the battery-powered cameras had kept recording, and were now transferring videos. I skipped through them quickly, spotting an interesting scene. A few days ago, apparently out of food again, Colin and Gil had a huge fight that turned physical. Gil couldn't match Colin's strength and was dragged out by her hair. About an hour later, Gil returned disheveled, with a bag of steamed buns and a pack of cigarettes. Colin greedily devoured 3 buns and lit up a cigarette, puffing contentedly. Gil silently curled up in a corner, eating 2 buns bit by bit. After that, no more words were exchanged between them. I stared at Gil, who looked like a broken toy, until my eyes burned and blurred. I suspected, like in a past life, she might have been sent by Colin to trade herself for survival supplies with the neighborhood tyrant, Eric. Would that have been my fate if I went? Thankfully I didn't. Thankfully I died. That's why I have this chance to start over, protect myself and my family. I fast-forwarded to the evening. Colin opened a plastic bag, ate 2 buns and tossed half to Gil when she asked for more. When she finished and asked for more, Colin slapped her hard. "Stupid bee. You've had more than enough." Gil snapped too. "Colin, you better realize. I earned this stuff. It's mine. Yours, my. You're mine, so everything you get is mine too. Colin. You heartless beast. I curse you to die wretchedly." After shouting, she ran out. As I watched the live feed, Gil hadn't returned. She probably went to Eric. In the past life, Eric ruled with fear, controlling lackeys with supplies. Now, having a woman at his mercy seemed to fit. With the power outage, Colin's AC was just a useless box. He bundled up under layers of clothes, even summer teas piled on top like a human-built tomb. He hadn't moved in ages. I thought he might be dead until he slowly stretched out and fumbled for the remote and charged his phone. I cursed quietly. How is he still alive? But by the looks of him, not for long, just a little push needed. He slowly sat, face ashen, eyes sunken, skin clinging to bone. Every move took ages, looking like he was chewing on silk from a quilt. I called him via video. Seeing it was me, he brightened up and answered, shaky. My face was full of fake concern as I feigned care. "Colin, how's it going over there? Got enough to eat? Your sweetheart treating you well?" He finally asked what he missed last time. "Jane, did you always know I was cheating?" I raised an eyebrow. 7. Did you forget about your post on social media? After Colin heard that, he went silent for a minute, then changed the subject with a hoarse voice. "Jane, I miss you. Where are you? Wanna know? I'll show you." I switched my phone to the back camera and headed to the kitchen. It's Mid-Autumn Festival today, and my mom was preparing a family feast. She kept it modest with the portions, but my mom still filled the table with dishes. Big yellow crabs, glossy braised pork, flavorful lamb stew, crispy braised prawns, sweet and sour fish, and refreshing mustard chicken. There weren't many fresh vegetables at home, mostly meat dishes. When Colin saw this, he went crazy. "Jane, you're at your parents', right? Help me, please. I'm begging you.
I'm starving.
Please help me. I'm begging you. I know I messed up, I won't cheat again. Help me, and I'll be good to you from now on." "Be good to me? Are you kidding?" I didn't get mad but chuckled. "You're really dreaming. But we were once married, so I don't want you to starve. Here's a tip. Tell me. The man on the screen was crying so hard that his snot was almost in his mouth, eagerly asking. A distant source won't quench immediate thirst. "Remember your little affair? Isn't she enjoying easy life just downstairs? Said she'd love you to death back then, did she think of you now?" With that, I hung up the video call. Let those two deal with each other. In my past life, my tragic death was partly Gil's fault. She not only took my stuff but teamed up with Colin to abuse me, even deprived me of food. The snow was waist deep, and she urged Colin to force me out to find supplies. Even the idea to offer myself to Eric for food was initially her suggestion. In this life, could I let her be? I switched to the surveillance footage. Colin crawled out of a pile of clothes, furiously smashing everything around him. From the bedroom to the living room, his strength quickly ran out and he slumped on the sofa, dazed. Then he got up and went out. He soon returned with someone else. He dragged Gil in by her hair, slammed the door and started beating her. "You BTC, enjoying yourself outside without thinking of me? Ungrateful BT, dare to abandon me? Thinking only of surviving yourself, did you think of me? I'm about to starve to death. Go get me something from Eric. Do you hear me?" Gil fought back, struggling fiercely. Though Colin was weak, his size still restrained her. Gil, unable to escape, searched for a tool to fight back. Then she touched an axe. She raised it and brought it down hard on the man's head. Colin's eyes widened in disbelief as he crashed to the ground. Fearing he'd get up, Gil took the axe and hacked at him several more times. It wasn't until Colin was completely gone, Gil fled hastily. I stared at the motionless man's body on the screen for a long time. Then tears fell. Not for him, but for my love-blinded self, betrayed by my marriage, killed by my partner. I finally avenged myself. I composed myself and left the bedroom, just in time for dinner. I shared the good news with my parents. My dad didn't say much, just smiled and went to fetch the aged wine from the year I was born. Filled everyone's glasses. Our family raised our fragrant wine, toasting vigorously. Celebrating the fresh start. Celebrating true family reunion. With Colin dead, I never opened the surveillance again. As if erasing a whole world from my life. I focused on the disaster's progress. It's been a full month since this natural disaster began. The blizzard showed no sign of letting up. Countless people starved and froze. Yet, the government kept airdropping supplies and food, working hard on repairing lines. Even not knowing if or when this disaster would end, they never lost hope, never gave up on people. During frequent power and internet outages, we relied on radio broadcasts to boost our spirits, getting through each day. Another month passed like this. The temperature dropped to -70 degrees, snow reaching third-floor windows. Then one ordinary night, the storm stopped silently. At first, people feared it was just a pause, but the sun showed up, dispersing the heavy clouds, chasing away this nightmare of a disaster. The government ramped up relief efforts, and citizens actively helped themselves. Dad and I geared up and joined volunteer efforts post-snow clearing. By the time society slowly returned to normal, and folks resumed their lives, it was almost New Year. I went back to what used to be home. Heard someone say in the community, "Oh, the former property manager Colin ate human flesh." I nearly died of fright when police carried out skeletons from his place. I stepped inside the house. Colin's body was gone, leaving only dried bloodstains everywhere. I carefully stepped around them and found his documents, then went to get a death certificate. Also handed police the surveillance footage, the part where Gil murdered him. After all, murder demands justice. Karma might be late, but it never misses.